Happy New Year! New Year, new you. Maybe New Year, same you. In the spirit of the fact that January is when we see gym memberships skyrocket and then attendance rates plummet back down, as well as just judging by my social media feeds and the advertising I'm getting for various diets, diet products, cleanses, detoxes, etc., I thought that January was the perfect time to continue the series I started in the fall about the rise of an awareness of aesthetic and how I think that that may be indicative of kind of a broader cultural moment where we are increasingly focused on the aesthetic or the sort of vibe of things versus the substance. And the awareness moment I had of thinking of today's topic, which is basically wellness, the aesthetic of wellness, the aesthetic of health, I became aware and decided to include this topic in this series when I was watching a TikTok, which I now can't find, which is one of the things I don't love about TikTok. It makes refinding things that you enjoyed seeing very difficult. But I saw a TikTok at the beginning of last year that literally brought me to tears. It was a very conventionally attractive, very thin, pretty girl talking about the impacts of COVID on her day-to-day life because she is somebody who is severely immunocompromised and is at very high risk if she were to get something like COVID of what potentially could happen to her, up to and including no longer being with us. And one of the things she said in that is, I am not healthy. I have never been healthy. I am not a healthy person. And it brought me to tears because it made me realize that looking at her, she on the outside embodied everything that I personally associate with the idea of health, of wellness. And yet what she was admitting and just saying so baldly was that she was not healthy and that she needed this community protection of disease prevention measures in order to ensure that she would continue to be around. And it brought me to tears because as somebody who has conceptualized themselves as fat from as far back as I can remember, even though now looking back at the pictures, I think the messaging I got about my body versus the reality was very skewed. Thank you, 90s and early 2000s. But as somebody who has always thought of themselves as fat, I've chronically had this feeling of like, I know I'm fat, but I promise I'm healthy. I promise I am. My blood sugars are totally normal. My blood pressure is perfect. My cholesterol is pretty normal. I'm healthy. Don't judge me. I don't think I had really voiced that that was an instinctual response for myself, but seeing that, it made me cry because I am somebody who has been recently diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. I no longer fully conceptualize myself as somebody healthy beyond what I have always been told is the most defining measure of health, of wellness, which is weight. So just seeing her admit that really stirred up something in me that I have frankly been kind of investigating and exploring for a year through various books, articles, media. I have absolutely, and you will hear this podcast be referenced frequently throughout this video, I've become obsessed with the Maintenance Phase podcast as well as You're Wrong About. Shout out to Jess Owens for putting me onto Maintenance Phase. I absolutely love it. Their extra Patreon episodes are also awesome, so if you guys enjoy some of the things I mentioned, I would definitely recommend supporting them there. But I've been really processing and digging through my own biases and assumptions about what health is versus what do I think health looks like. And it has made me aware that I think we, at least here in the US, and since we drive a lot of the world's sort of shared culture, I think probably this is a common feeling abroad, that we are very obsessed with what does health look like and performing that image of healthiness or of wellness. But what is really driving the substance of that? What does it even really mean to be healthy or to be well? As I've been investigating this, I have read a lot of books or reread sections from a lot of books. And I may be referencing these in this commentary video. I'll put a list of some of them down below, but I had gotten like 15 or 20,000 words into writing an essay about this and realized that I was still nowhere close to saying everything I wanted to say. So we're gonna freeball this a little bit. Instead of this being a formally written essay, I'm gonna talk through kind of the gist of the thought process and journey I've been on, and I'm probably gonna have to make some follow-ups to this, which I already knew. I know I wanna do a dedicated video about the origins of at least my own personal fat phobia, as well as some thoughts about ableism. But in the meantime, let's talk about performing health, the aesthetic of wellness, etc. in our culture. Disclaimer here, we are going to be talking about diet culture, dieting, body image, ableism, fat phobia, I mean like anything around ableness, weight cycling, fitness, etc. All the content warnings here. I am going to also reference disordered eating, things like that. All the content warnings there, and also just a little disclaimer or just an acknowledgement. Yes, I am a fat lady. I am a fat, chronically ill woman. If you think that that means that I'm entitled to be abused by you, I'm gonna say that that says a lot more about you than me, but also, yeah, I'm fat. If you think that that's some sort of secret to me or to anybody watching this, I don't really know what to tell you. Hopefully you'll stick around because I think we're going to dive into some of the reasons why you may have such an emotional reaction to seeing fat people talk about these kinds of topics. So, you know, if you're willing to have a little bit of an open mind, stick around. Abuse will not be tolerated. Okay, so to start off with, part of why I decided to change strategies of how I was going to do this video is that I got to the point where I was like, what does wellness even mean? It's such a nebulous and abstract concept that I got this like sort of in my head spiraling awareness that what I think of when I think of the word wellness is very likely not what everyone thinks of. So I did an informal poll for essentially word association. Now, disclaimer here, this was clearly not some sort of scientific study. This is not formally random sampling because it's only polling people to whom I have some kind of social media reach to. It also, I asked people to associate or tell me the first thing that came to mind when they thought of the word wellness. I didn't give people specific, questions that they had to check off and say what they thought. I was really wanting to get people's first reaction when they heard that word. And then I have, after the fact, gone in and tried to group responses based on common themes I saw. So not scientifically or statistically rigorous, but this was me just trying to get a pulse check, a temperature check, gut check on if what I thought of when I think of wellness matched what a lot of people thought. And it was actually super interesting seeing the way that this data broke down. It validated some of the assumptions that I had, but it also raised kind of new contours to my thinking that I really appreciated. So if you look at the chart overall, the number 1 and number 2 response types I think are pretty interesting. The number 1 association in people's responses is that they thought of something related to selling stuff, specific products of some kind. So that could be anything from like a green smoothie to some sort of weight loss shake or a specific food group. And then also just the word diet, be it diet culture, diet industry, all of those things were the number 1 association. But then the second association was what I would describe as sort of holistic well-being. A lot of people talked about mind-body wholeness, being at peace with both mind and body. A lot of people were very specific to say that for them, when they hear wellness, that is specifically association for them of not just physical health, but also mental health, spiritual health, just overall holistic well-being. What I thought was also interesting is that many responses had the impulse to clarify, I'm of two minds when I hear this word. I both think instinctually of sort of holistic well-being, but then that is immediately followed by a more cynical or a more measured reaction, which is you're trying to sell me something. There was a ton of people who talked about that sort of dual response that word elicits for them. And even beyond just sort of, I guess, slightly more neutral words to describe what people associate with wellness. So, diet or product or selling, whatever. Beyond even that, there was more aggressively negative connotations, which was the third biggest category, which were things like scam, meaningless, cult. So very negative, coercive kind of language around wellness. And then 4 and 5 were things related to mental health, followed by things related to specifically physical health and the state of basically not being sick. So even just in that top 5 response, and we'll get into some of the further contours that we see in this data, it's very interesting to me that there's sort of this polar response, both of what people agree is the surface level meaning of the word, which is holistic well-being or mental health or physical health. In some way on the surface, it's meant to be a wide spanning word referring to overall health, but at the same time, it has this specific undertone of selling, of trying to coerce someone, or essentially negatively influencing people. And even beyond that, then we had a ton of other more specific associations. I'm gonna say one of the most fascinating things that I took away from this was the number of people who specifically referenced Goop or Gwyneth Paltrow to the point that I felt like I had to make her own category. So there's that specific sort of celebrity branded idea of wellness. And I think that's also reflected in how the 6th most common response was something around influencers and social media, celebrities, people portraying a specific image or lifestyle related to wellness. What was also interesting to me was that while people were willing to use the word diet pretty often, a lot of people weren't willing to actually say what a diet is typically meant to do, which is to cause weight loss. That was actually one of the lesser responses in the scheme of overall responses. Most people wanted to communicate the fact that when they hear wellness, they do strongly associate that with something having to do with weight, but very few people were willing to actually name that as weight loss. They wanted to use what is frankly a more euphemistic term, which is diet or dieting. I was also surprised or interested to see how frequently something having to do with money came up. So like I said, the number one category was having to do with products and selling and diet culture things. But then there was also a lot of people, and I guess I hadn't even thought of this sort of nuancing of the word wellness, who would talk about things like a spa or a wellness retreat or overall just different indulgent things having to do with sort of spending money on relaxation. And one place that we'll eventually get to, and I enjoy that some people specifically called this out because I do think that this is subtext that maybe we don't as readily go to, but a lot of people also mentioned something to do with work or their insurance company, because at least here in the US, I don't know how it is everywhere. In the US, there's a lot of things branded as wellness that is sold by your employer or your work-funded insurance because they are wanting to encourage you to adopt certain habits under the guise of wellness. So several people mentioned, for instance, like wellness newsletters that their works insurance sends to them, etc. And then there were also specific calls out to exercise. So again, I think that that is a pretty, I guess I should have prefaced all of this. When I hear the word wellness, I immediately think weight loss and exercise. Like that is my immediate association with that word. And some people clearly did have that. I think there were more associations with exercise than calling something weight loss, though again, diet in general was overwhelmingly what the response was. But then there were also some allusions to kind of cultural factors. So I thought it was interesting that a couple people mentioned Americanness with this, and also several people mentioned whiteness as being an association with the word wellness, that there was this specific image that came to mind that was, I think several people mentioned like a blonde white lady, athleisure wear. So I think that that is a specific connotation it seems like for people. And then the last group I thought was notable, and I again would probably agree with this connotation, is something having to do with clean eating. Some people naming that as pseudoscience or being anti-science. Other people taking kind of a more positive connotation and talking about like naturalness, being free from processing or free from chemicals, organic. Some people taking that in more of a positive connotation and other people portraying that a little bit more negatively. But overall, I think what I took from this is that I kind of classify these different associations into four kind of types of responses. There are several of these that are correlated to some kind of action. So working out, losing weight, like naming that as a verb. So there's a few of these that are verbs. A lot of these are more nebulous, feeling or abstract idea-based things. So something like holistic well-being, or this was also, I think, a really honest and real response from several people of this idea of wellness being something I feel pressured to do. It's this sort of emotional response of pressure. Somebody said, I'm not good enough, never feeling well mentally or physically, and it makes me feel bad about myself. Several of these associations are still pretty abstract ideas or rooted in emotion. Several of these I grouped together as sort of cultural forces. So something like an influencer shaping our perception of what wellness or health mean. And then a lot of these are correlated in some way to money. So basically we have this very nebulous end goal that's being pushed by various forces, which we'll talk a little bit more about here in a minute. We have this end goal of wellness, that we are supposed to look a certain way. So many of these things were correlated to being fat. Several people said things like rebranded diet culture, this idea that we have to have this certain look, but that look is very specifically correlated with this idea of being healthy, that it is some sort of virtue to achieve this certain kind of physical body type, and that if you achieve that body type, what it will communicate to others is that you are healthy. Even if we accept that that's what the end goal is, we have all of these different potential actions that we could take to get to that point. So we could go on a wellness retreat to relax and try to achieve some kind of mental health that is a part of the component of what this sort of nebulous term of wellness even means. We could go on a diet. We could exercise or follow a booty boot camp or whatever. We could do all of these various actions. So the cultural environment is defining kind of what we think of as possible actions we could take, but almost all of these actions are facilitated by some kind of spending. It's some kind of selling. And what is it that people are selling? Well, I think people are selling really a lifestyle.
Are you vaccinated?
Maybe. No, I'm not.
You're not?
No. I think that it's more about the lifestyle versus like vaccinated, not vaccinated. Like,
What is the lifestyle?
like being healthy, like taking care of yourself, like your mind, your body. If you live a lifestyle of wellness, then your body should be able to handle COVID.
So what do you recommend for basic public health?
Eating healthy, boosting your immunity system, and don't watch the news because it's just brainwashing you with fear. And the fear is lowering your frequency.
We could even go back to something like the meme of the laughing woman with a salad. So if you've seen that meme, it's that so often when people are trying to sell various kinds of diet or fitness related lifestyle things, there is this very thin woman, often a blonde in athleisure, who is eating a salad and laughing. Well, why is that the image? It's because what they're trying to communicate is you're going to look like this and you're going to feel good when you look like this. This is the image we're trying to sell you. And now, going back to what we talked about in my first video about aesthetics, really I think part of why this is kicked into overdrive is social media, right? So we have so many fitness influencers or wellness influencers who are constantly trying to sell us this image, and if we buy the image, we're then willing to buy their products.
I'm not saying that makeup is good. I'm not saying that the beauty standard of heavy makeup was ever not harmful. And I'm also not saying that skincare itself is a bad or harmful thing. I'm saying that there is something uniquely insidious about our current cultural obsession with heavily curated illusions of authenticity. In 2016, the beauty standard was that you put on a lot of makeup and you looked like you were wearing a lot of makeup. And absolutely, that was harmful in its own way. That was problematic in its own way. But now, the beauty standard is that you wake up and you look perfect because your hair is perfect and your skin is perfect and you're glowing from within and your teeth are so straight, they're naturally perfect, and you don't even have to try because you're just so perfect. And honestly, in terms of the way it affects young women, I think that's a lot worse. And it's awesome to take care of your skin. It's cool to not want to wear makeup. But now you have girls who have been doing a 12-step skincare routine since they were 13, who are terrified to have the sun touch their skin because they think it's going to age them, and who are obsessed with looking clean, which is like such a loaded word in terms of racism and classism. The thing that is so insidious about this to me is that the pop skincare industry, like companies like Glossier, are selling this market shift as like an empowerment win. Because the feminist zeitgeist shifted and companies realized they couldn't just sell heavy makeup anymore, so they decided to replace it with a different but equally oppressive beauty standard that they could sell as empowering or liberating. Have you ever seen anybody in real life who actually has glass skin? Because I've seen maybe one or two in my entire life. The new skincare standard is just as unrealistic as the makeup standards were. Except this time, they're lying to you and saying that it's your fault if you don't look like that because you're not like drinking enough water or thinking enough positive thoughts. It's like this weird uncanny valley thing where we are constantly being told that anybody can look like that, but nobody actually does. And what's worse is that they're attaching this like lifestyle moral purity test thing to it, where they're saying like, you can be healthy and happy and clean and whole, and you can be that girl if you just put the right chemicals on your face in the right order.
But the reality is that image that we are seeing that we think of as the picture of health is either fake or has actually very little to do with someone's actual health.
I'm 4'11", 124 pounds, 26-inch waist, 32 in the bust, 41 around the ass. Don't offend my plus-size queens, please.
These are hip dips. Why am I posting a photo of my crotch on the internet? Because diet culture and the fitness industry's current fad is to say that hip dips are a problem area that need to be fixed. Spoiler alert, they're not. They're just a very normal, slight inward depression that come in all shapes and sizes. But by diet culture telling us that these are problem areas that need to be fixed, they're instilling shame in us, which naturally makes us want to change these even though there's nothing wrong with them. Thanks thanks to this, we part with our hard-earned money and waste it on things that don't actually work or that we don't need. For example, workouts that get rid of hip dips, not possible.
People can flex up and down the Noah back. Not a lot of people can.
I didn't even know they were flexing.
Former personal trainer / failed model, and yes, I can confirm we're all flexing. You know that scene in Crazy Stupid Love where Emma Stone says to Ryan Gosling it looks like he's Photoshopped? He was. Flexing is a form of pre-Photoshop. Okay, let me show you what's going on here. Okay. This is neutral. Pulled up, general engaging, scoop. With the scoop, you want to feel as if your bladder has collapsed in on itself. As you can see, I'm having a conversation with you while I'm still flexed, which is all part of the lie. Every shirtless dude on Instagram is flexing, and they probably did push-ups beforehand.
This is the behind the scenes of many photo shoots. I know Victoria's Secret used to do the same.
This is one of the most accurate things I've seen on TikTok about the modeling industry. I know it doesn't look it right now, but I'm a model. I've been a model for the past 7 years, and it is all fake. It's so insane. I literally own mannequin padding that I take with me to some shoots because I'm not big enough to fit in their samples. It's just crazy to me. And then I have these massive hips with a tiny waist and huge boobs that just want me to be that image.
Or I hate to break it to you, but 95% of the fitness industry and the fitness people that you follow are not natty.
It's like he's making content specifically for me to stitch, and it's not 95%. That's a little too low. It's 99.9%. The reason why this is a big deal is because currently the perception of what is possible, natural versus unnatural, is so skewed that it needs to be corrected.
Okay, let's just start with the whole Instagram fitness thing. And in particular, let's talk about bikini bodybuilding. A lot of the very huge social media fitness models once were bikini bodybuilding pros or bikini competitors, like your Paige Hathaways, your Michelle Lewins, and your Jessica Aravellos, and who else? There's so many. Ashley Kaltwasser have played a huge part in shaping what we as normal women find to be a fit and healthy body. It's warped us completely. What we now think is fit and healthy is so far removed, it's scary to me. Maybe you guys aren't aware of this, but I'm gonna maybe just put some images here so you can see a pro bikini competitor from 5 years ago, half a decade ago, or maybe a bit more, to the latest bikini pros now, right? What the what you're seeing now these days is not normal, and it is not healthy, and it's not sustainable, and it's not real. And unfortunately, these are the images that you get bombarded with on social media. If you really knew the truth, you wouldn't want to follow these people, but you don't. You see this glamorous, kind of sparkly, amazing lifestyle where these girls are, putting on sparkly bikinis, and they've got abs all year round, they've got amazing glutes, and, they're dedicated to the gym. That's not how it is in reality, and that's not what they're showing you that's happening behind the scenes. There's a lot of mental illness in this industry. There are a lot of girls with exercise addiction, with eating disorders, with orthorexia, disordered thinking generally about food, or body dysmorphia, or body image issues, serious mental issues, who go into bodybuilding, who go into bikini competitions because it's a healthy way to justify their illness. They're on starvation diets. They lose their periods. They fuck their hormones up. Girls have come to me as clients, not had their menstrual cycle for years and years and years because they've been competing. It fucks your body up. It is not healthy. You're not meant to be at those low body fat levels long term. You're not really meant to be there at all. But of course now, because those images are splashed all over social media and on all the fitness mags, you as a normal person, normal girl who just wants to be fit and healthy, you're looking at these images and aspiring to that look. But that look isn't attainable because that look came from restrictive starvation diets. It came from over-exercising. And this is the big one, drugs.
And really, if what we're saying is we want to be healthy, shouldn't we be going to doctors for that? If really what we're saying is we want health and not a look and not a specific body type, we are not pursuing that. We are pursuing a outcome of being healthy. Why wouldn't we associate the idea of wellness or health with doctors who, at least ostensibly, are the experts on health? It was interesting to me that that only a couple of people even mentioned doctors, but so many more mentioned influencers. And some of this, I think, comes down to sort of interpersonal performance of what we think healthy looks like. So for instance, this is a very good summary of a lot of the things that I've been kind of trying to synthesize, at least the first part where it's kind of talking a little bit more big picture. One of the things that this book touches on, and I think is very true, is the interrelational bonding that I can only speak from a woman's perspective, but women in particular get from constantly talking to each other about what we are doing to try to achieve a certain body type, often under the guise of getting healthy, feeling better in my body, having a detox, eating cleaner. It is this kind of bonding that we are all constantly trying to modify our bodies in a certain way. And it's also signaling something about ourselves to other people when we engage in that talk, which is, I'm somebody who cares about my body, I'm somebody who cares about being healthy, and I am doing a good job of performing womanhood. And unfortunately, in the 21st century, part of performing womanhood, at least for an American woman, is performing a constant dissatisfaction with our bodies and a constant striving to mold our bodies to look more like the idealized version of what we may previously have seen in celebrities or models or fitness magazines, and now what we see daily in our online social media feeds from other influencers and just from regos, right? Like just normies who are out there posting on TikTok and may have something go viral of them trying some new detox cleanse or before and after them taking up a new exercise regime. I also think that this may feed into the rise of athleisure. Now, I do also think that is a function of increasing intolerance for discomfort in clothing, a decreased formality in what is expected for you to wear outside. So I'm not saying that athleisure is 100% tied to this rise, but I don't think it's a coincidence that we have seen so many of these Instagram models and so many of these fitness influencers who live their life in athleisure, who are also constantly selling athleisure wear, and a correlation to that of it being more socially acceptable, for instance, to be out and about in yoga pants. It's communicating not only something about your willingness to show a part of your body, because they tend to be very revealing, and sort of the desirability of your body if you have achieved a specific look, but also the fact that you are the kind of person who does yoga, or you are the kind of person who gets done with their rock climbing session and runs to the grocery store. It's also, again, performing this sort of overall lifestyle of wellness that is not specifically correlated to a specific health outcome. And now I think it's time to kind of address the elephant in the room of, does this work? Like, is it important for you to lose weight? We're saying that we want people to lose weight for health reasons. Is that actually important? We're saying we want people to exercise so that they will be healthier. Does it actually work? I think, frankly, the data is pretty inconclusive. The more you dig into this, the more you realize that nutritional science and overall the definitive data about what the perfect body type is for maximal health doesn't really exist. We do have correlations. So we do have correlations of being very overweight. So like if we're talking about the bell curve of weight, what the data seems to suggest is that if you are in the 95% of the bell curve, your weight is not really necessarily that correlated to health outcomes. If you are in the tails on either side, it does seem like there is some correlation, for instance, for being underweight with decreased mortality. There's some studies or suggestions that some of this has to do with as you age and you potentially, for instance, like fall and break your hip, if you don't have kind of extra energy reserves to help you bounce back from that event when you're older, that can lead to an increased likelihood of mortality. There's also, for extreme ED situations, definitely correlations with muscle mass being eroded, including the muscles to your heart, which can cause an early or premature death. There's actually even less data really to say definitively that being fat is what makes someone die.
Is this an opportunity to talk about the obesity paradox? And yes, it is cold enough for me. The obesity paradox is the fun way the science and medical community maintain their bias against fat people. See, because instead of going back and being like, maybe weight isn't as impactful on people's health as we stated, they just call it a paradox. It's too confusing. This paradox states is actually a lot of people who carry extra weight on them fare better during medical emergencies. Like, you're more likely to survive a severe heart attack, cancer, illness, injury. Carrying extra energy stores on your body helps you during recovery. And instead of using this opportunity to stop stigmatizing larger bodies in medical fields, they just said, it's a paradox. We're confused.
There are correlations with things like heart disease and certain kinds of diabetes, but it's not clear that those outcomes are directly caused by being fat. There are correlations, but they're not provably causations. They could be caused by a myriad of other factors, including a lot of socioeconomic sort of macro forces that manifest themselves in individuals.
Oh, what's this? A comprehensive long-term study with excellent methodology about the relationship between weight, behaviors, and health? Let's talk about it. In this study, researchers looked at 11,761 cisgendered men and women of varying ages, races, and weights. They asked the subjects to engage in some combination of 4 different health-promoting behaviors, and the health of the subjects was tracked for an average of 170 months, which is about 14 years of data collected per person. The 4 health-promoting behaviors were 5 or more servings of fruits and veggies per day, exercising more than 12 times per month, limiting alcohol up to 1 drink per day for cis women and up to 2 drinks per day for cis men, and not smoking at all. And just want to point out that these are not healthy habits for everyone. I have chronic pain and exercising 12 times per month would be excruciating. Or also there are people with digestive diseases for whom eating 5 servings of fruits and veggies per day would cause a lot of damage. So these are very general concepts. Now let's get to those results. On this graph, the vertical axis is health hazards. So the taller the bar, the more health risks there are. And then the horizontal axis is how many of the 4 behaviors were adopted. And you can see here that the participants were divided into 3 categories based on their BMI. Now, BMI is trash, but since that's what they use, those are the words we have to use in order to talk about this study. So the lightest colored bar represents people in the quote normal weight category. The middle bar is people in the quote overweight category. And then the darkest bar is for people in the quote obese category. So you can see here in this first section where none of the health promoting behaviors are being utilized that there was a big difference in health hazards between the 3 weight categories. And to be clear, that doesn't mean that weight is causing that difference. That difference can also be caused by the fact that fat people are denied medical care or receive far worse care when we do get medical care, or the fact that fat people experience immense stress from all the stigma and prejudice we face. Regardless, what you can see here is that after only 1 health promoting behavior is adopted, the health risks both dropped and compressed between all of the BMI categories dramatically. And by the time we get to all 4 health promoting behaviors, not only are the health risks extremely low for everyone, but there is virtually no difference in the health risks between all 3 different weight categories, despite the fact that the weight of the participants did not change. Weight is a terrible predictor of health, and every single time we study other factors like genetics, environment, and behavior, this is what we find.
And even if we could definitively say, yes, you died of fat, if that was what was on your death certificate, we do not have a replicable way to produce sustained large weight loss in populations.
So you're not alone. We actually don't have an evidence-based way to safely, reliably, and sustainably produce weight loss for most people. We're taught that when we go on a diet and lose weight and then gain the weight back, that it's our fault. And so naturally, we blame ourselves. But how many diets have you been on, and how many times has the weight come back? And sometimes even more. If you're like most dieters, it's every single time. And trust me, you are all not failures, I promise. This happens because your brain has a sense of what it thinks you should weigh, regardless of what you consciously believe or what diet culture says is normal. It's called your set point weight range, and it's a range of 10 to 15 pounds. You can use lifestyle habits to move up and down within that range, but it's much harder to get outside of that range. Have you ever noticed how you initially lose weight when you're on a diet, but then it gets harder and harder? This likely explains why. When you lose weight below your body's predetermined range, it responds by trying to make you gain the weight back. It makes you hungrier, it makes food more rewarding in the brain, it slows your metabolism, and it decreases the energy your muscles burn. No matter your size, your body responds to dieting as if it were starving. And from an evolutionary perspective, this makes a lot of sense. When food was scarce, our ancestors' survival depended on the body's ability to conserve energy, and regaining weight when food became available protected against the next food shortage. And for most of human history, starvation has been a much greater threat to our survival than overeating. And so this explains why set points go up, but very rarely ever are observed to go down. What this means is your body's response to weight loss attempts might be to increase your set point. And this is likely why your weight continues to go up. And we actually have a lot of research to support this. In Dr. Sandra Ammett's book, Why Diets Make Us Fat, she found that when teenage girls went on diets, they were 3 times more likely to be overweight 5 years later than the girls who didn't diet at all. She also found that 5 years after dieting, most people gained the weight back. 40% gained even more. So what this means is the most likely outcome of going on a diet is that you're going to gain weight and be even heavier in the long run than if you didn't diet at all. So you're better off cutting your losses now. And instead of chasing intentional weight loss, work to heal your relationship with food and your body and take a weight neutral approach to health so that your weight can stabilize within its set point range.
For one thing, it's incredibly difficult to study. This is a fascinating case study in how essentially we came, especially in the 80s and 90s, to think of fat as being the villain of the food pyramid. This kind of documents the history of how that came to be a part of different food recommendations. Spoilers, Ansel Keys seems like is kind of the Voldemort of this particular story. But part of what it reveals and explores is just how difficult really, really good studies about the effects of different dieting is to do. Because basically the gold standard of scientific research is double blind. Well, how do you double blind or give someone a placebo for food? For vaccine research, for example, they very clearly can give you like either, I don't know, an injection of saline or the vaccine and see what happens. Well, somebody knows whether or not they're eating this gigantic roast or they're eating sauteed veggies. It's very difficult to actually have truly double blind for both the participant and the scientist, and therefore there's a lot of contradictory findings over the years about what various diets do or don't do for populations, including what they do for specifically inducing weight loss that is sustained beyond, I think, a 3-year period. The likelihood of losing a substantial amount of weight, which is defined as 10%, and keeping it off for more than 3 years goes down every single year from that weight loss. So there's some contradiction in the data. But basically what we found is that it is incredibly difficult for people to lose weight. And if the messaging that people have is this is something that is necessary for their health, and so they have pressure that this is something that they need to do, and the message is given to society writ large that pressuring each other to lose weight through these different sort of social scripting about, oh, you know, it's after the holidays, it's time to lose weight. The reality is yes, that kind of messaging does increase the desire to lose weight, but it doesn't increase the ability to lose weight. So what you have are people who are feeling shamed either because they are truly what we would describe as fat, so like maybe somebody with my body type, or somebody who just has a little extra like middle-aged pudge or just like a belly pooch or whatever. There's this perception of like, it's not just that I need to do this for aesthetic reasons, it's that I need to do this for health reasons. And if I don't do this, then I am not just unhealthy for myself, but I am a bad person because there's a moral imperative for me to do this for reasons that we will get into towards the end.
Before you leave, you need to make sure that you try Waffle House. Yeah, I've heard of that place. Do they have like top tier waffles? No. High quality food? No. Is it like a good family environment? No. Do they keep the restaurant clean? No. Are they known for having the best of literally anything? No. Will I feel safe there? No. Do they have any healthy options or? No. When they serve me my coffee, can I be sure that there won't be something crawling around in it? No. Are they social distancing? No. Were they social distancing at peak pandemic? No. Would I see this restaurant on Food Network? No. All right, so this place sounds god awful.
So this entire thing that is being sold to us is that this wellness industry, which is so focused on diet products, weight loss, there's a strong correlation that that kind of wellness is necessary for health. But then there's a tremendous number of people who have bought into that image of what it means to be healthy and are trying to perform that image for other people so that they know that they also buy into that image even if they're not there yet. They're reaching for it. Don't worry, I'm ordering this salad. I'm going vegan. I'm cutting out dairy. I too am bought into this image of what it is to be healthy. We have them buying into this image that ultimately can't fully deliver what is promised.
How do I eat healthy and lose weight? Well, you want to eat fruit, but not too much because fruit has a lot of sugar and sugar is bad for you. Avoid carbs because it's bad for you and raises blood sugar levels. But also, carbs are your body's main source of energy. You have to eat every few hours so it boosts your metabolism. But also try intermittent fasting and go 16 hours without eating to help you lose weight. Going gluten-free will help reduce inflammation and help you lose weight. But also, gluten is not inherently bad for you and there's no reason to avoid it if there's no medical reason to. Don't eat eggs because it raises your cholesterol. But also, eggs are a great protein source and you should have it with breakfast. Lastly, fat makes you gain weight, but keto, a high-fat diet, will help you lose weight. Does that make sense?
And all this to say that there is just so much conflicting data that as I was trying to parse through this, it actually made me think about my theological training. So if you don't know, I have a master's in basically like religion theology. And one of the kind of concepts that gets talked about very disdainfully in that setting is this idea of proof texting. So this is where I'm speaking specifically from focus in Christianity. So this idea, people will pick a verse from the Bible and they will use that as the basis for an entire line of thinking, and they are not thinking about that verse in the overall context of what the entirety of that book has to say. So that is something that, in terms of like religious philosophizing, etc., is very looked down upon and is thought to be a very facile approach to biblical interpretation or biblical understanding. So there's sort of this disdain for that, but there's also this idea that you do end up needing to have what is called a hermeneutical key to make different parts of the Bible work together, because if you read a lot of verses in the Old and New Testament in Christianity, they seem to be contradicting each other, and we, could go down a whole road of the fact that probably they were, because they were written by people thousands of years apart who were not necessarily thinking of all this as one big religion. But taking that at face value, the idea of this is to identify a hermeneutical key, and this is something in the text that helps you understand and contextualize everything else. So for instance, in American Christianity, I would argue that the hermeneutical keys are either John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten son, that whosoever should believe in him should not perish but have everlasting life. Or that verse in Romans, I'm so proud I don't remember the exact quote and reference in Romans where it says, for the wages of sin of death, but salvation is the gift of life. The hermeneutical key being death, life, salvation, etc. Now I would argue that a better hermeneutical key coming from Jesus himself is love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, body, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. On this rests all the law and the prophets. But if you take one of those two hermeneutical keys and try to interpret the rest of your religion through one of them, you're going to arrive at very different outcomes because it will shade everything else that you are viewing in that religion. Or to take a more secular example, you could think about something like when here in the US they are determining who's going to be on the Supreme Court. A big part of the discussion around that is, how do you approach the Constitution? Do you have a hermeneutical key within the Constitution that drives your interpretation of it? Are you an originalist? Are you a literalist? Are you more looking at the Constitution as setting out some sort of guiding principles that then get applied differently over time? All of these go back to basically your hermeneutical key for interpreting that text as a whole, and this is why there's all of these complicated cases where we see the Constitution being applied, or just generally case law being applied in different ways. It's the same kind of idea. The reality is that there's a lot of parts of science where we don't need to do that. It's pretty easy to have double-blinded studies. It's easy to have more sort of empirical, this worked or didn't work type experiments that we run, or hypotheses that either get proven or disproven. But when it comes to the human body, a lot of that is pretty nuanced. I mean, I think that there's been some really fascinating work done in recent years to talk about the allostatic load of racism and what impact that has on Black Americans, for example, and their health outcomes. That may not have a specific sort of pathology in the body, but the cumulative effect of it is very real when you look at population level data. So yeah, there's some things that we can know pretty definitively. Ironically, given the state of the world, vaccines are some of the things having to do with health and wellness that are most backed up by double-blinded studies and much closer to the black and white end of things. But anything having to do with nutrition and the effects of different weights on your actual mortality is a lot more gray and have so much complexity in the interconnecting variables of it that parsing it all out is something that we're frankly still kind of at the beginning of in a lot of ways. The same is true for different diseases. Like for instance, I mentioned I have an autoimmune disease. The sort of root of where that particular disease comes from in me, its genetic components versus its epigenetic components, environmental factors, family history, personal choice. All of that is so complicated, and we can't even really definitively say like what causes my autoimmune disease. We just see that it's there. So while we have to say that medical science and overall understandings of health have come a huge way, even in the last 20 years, much less the last 100. I mean, think about your likely health outcomes if you have, for instance, breast cancer today than 20 years ago or 100 years ago. Very, very different. Not saying that we haven't made tremendous strides in the science of health and that we don't have certain things that we could label behavior-wise as being healthy or unhealthy. But what I'm trying to say is that I think we want to say that the key to wellness is very objective and we know what it looks like. But the reality is that it's much closer to something that you need a hermeneutical key to kind of unlock. And as I've been contemplating this, I've sort of thought through, okay, well, I could accept the model that I have or I've lived with for most of my life, which is that, yes, there's a very specific appearance to what healthy means and how it manifests in someone. Or if I choose to use a different hermeneutical key, if I choose to use some different studies that have different suggestions that have a much less cause and effect with, for instance, weight and health, what would that reveal about the way that I look at the world? And when I choose a hermeneutical key that doesn't correlate things like weight with health outcomes so strongly, two things become much clearer to me. By constantly focusing, I think weight is one of the most highly associated elements of health here in the US. I also had a fascinating comment from a viewer who had lived in the US versus having lived in France. And one of the things that they were observing was that weight and health are far less correlated in France than they are in the US. Weight is very tied to achieving a certain look, and it's much more explicit that that is what weight management is for. And I wonder if some of the reason why, at least here in the US, we have such a tight titration between weight and health outcomes in our public perception of what healthy looks like is the fact that we don't have a robust universal healthcare system available for everyone. That really health outcomes are far more correlated to money and access than we're willing to say, because if we said that, we would have to admit that we have chosen to live in a system where we don't actually care if everybody has relatively equal chances of living or dying based on their luck of where they are born and their socioeconomic status and whatever genes they happen to get dealt. If you keep health very tightly tied to individual choice, it becomes rhetorically much easier to perpetuate a system where healthcare is individual choice rather than something that at some point literally everybody will need. Because unless we've actually got some vampires running around, eventually everybody is going to need healthcare. But by distracting us from that and keeping us focused on how individual choices impact or don't impact health outcomes, you don't have to have, rhetorically, it's a lot easier to perpetuate a system that individual choice drives both health and your desire for or need for healthcare. And this actually made me think of an episode of You're Wrong About, where they were talking about the McDonald's hot coffee lawsuit. One of the recurring themes of that podcast and of Maintenance Phase is this idea of moral panics and sort of the history of moral panics. This book talks a lot about how the obesity epidemic is one of the more recent moral panics we've been experiencing. But part of what they were reflecting on in that particular podcast is that part of the whole rise of the frivolous lawsuit and of sort of a disdain for people trying to enact these frivolous lawsuits, the hot coffee McDonald's lawsuit being the most infamous one, is that it was also around the same time that there was massive deregulation in the US, where really, in a lot of cases, the only way to litigate a wrong was in courts because there were no longer laws dictating on the books sort of standards that everybody had to comply by. So if you live in a deregulated system and regulation isn't possible, in America, really, the civil lawsuit arena is one of the only ways to get your grievances redressed because there are not going to be see government pushed ramifications for people. So like if McDonald's is selling coffee that is hot enough, if you ever seen the pictures from this thing, it was wild. That is hot enough to literally scald someone's clothes to their thighs, because the FDA isn't going to step in and do something about that, it really gets driven by individuals suing companies to do that. But because the reason we deregulated was because we had a radically pro-big business stance at this point in American history, and really, spoilers, still do, we had to start making fun of these people because overall, we didn't want big businesses to have any regulations, and we didn't want them to have consequences. We wanted them to go out and just do their thing and everybody to shut up and take it. And so I can't help but wonder if some of the rhetoric that has become so ingrained in us in the last however many decades here in the US about personal choice being correlated to health, and most recently this moral panic around rising waistlines and how that says something bad about individuals morally, and you can't be fat because you're going to end up in the hospital and you're going to cost all of us money because you're using healthcare more. Well, if we had a universal healthcare, that presupposes that we could never have universal healthcare. Because if we had universal healthcare, all healthcare costs would go way down, and if some people need to use it more, it's not a big deal. Like, that's the whole point of having the costs split among everyone. If you happen to be born with some sort of debilitating disease, or you happen to be born with naturally high blood pressure, or you happen to be born with type 1 diabetes, or whatever, or you happen to be born in a bigger body, and maybe we eventually decide or discover that yes, it definitely does impact your overall mortality. If we had shared healthcare costs, this sort of moral panic around fat people would be much less potent here in the US.
Oh my God, like I know. It's like COVID's a problem. Everything's terrible. I've gotten your emails. You don't need to keep calling me. I've gotten the emails. But it's like, it's hard to be a government. Like, there's a lot of things going on at one time. Like, I know, like, there's people dying and, like, blah, 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 blah. And, like, when people are refusing to get vaccinated, and, like, what are you going to do? Like, I know that. But one thing that y'all never seem to think about or care about is that there's companies that make military weapons that want to make more money. And it's like, y'all can't expect me to ignore that. So we're putting out new guidelines because, like, it's honestly just getting inconvenient. Like, I'm tired of it. Like, it's like, oh, I was exposed to COVID and I can't work at Chili's for 10 days. It's like, we need you at the Chili's. So COVID doesn't count anymore. If you're sick, you're actually fine. It's all up here. Mind over matter. So when your symptoms are there, if you're not on the ground, you can still clock in.
Hey man, how's it going? Well, I was supposed to do surgery today, but apparently I'm out of network, so the patient had to cancel. Out of network? What does that mean? It just means insurance won't pay for the patient to come see me for their health care. Oh, I didn't know you worked for the insurance company. What? I'm in private practice. I don't work for the insurance company. You sure? Of course I'm sure. So when you see a patient, you send a bill to the insurance company, right? Yeah. And then the insurance company will pay you for your services. Yeah, that's right. Well, who decides how much you get paid? Well, you have to sign a contract with the insurance company. Well, what happens if you don't sign the contract? You don't get paid. Huh. So you do work, and the insurance company pays you for that work, and they pay you whatever amount they decide they want to pay you for the work you're doing. Yeah. I don't know, it kind of sounds like you're working for the insurance company.
That moral panic, by the way, also gives people the ability to feel morally superior if their body appears to be healthier than someone else's. And I do think that this is where we get a lot of the concern trolling around fat people of either I have what appears to be a healthy body and you do not, and we have all agreed that individual choice is what drives if you are healthy or not, and since you have made that choice, you have signed yourself up for my contempt.
You're sitting here calling me fat?
Oh, you don't think you are?
No, because I fucking love who I am. I'm sorry. No,
you
get the fuck out of my face!
I don't have to. And don't swear at me like that.
I don't give a shit!
I do. That's your problem. I do give a shit. But you don't. Obviously. Don't come back on that stage with those shorts. I'm warning you.
Who are you?
I'm actually sick of comments like this. I'm well aware I can be thin. I've been thin. In fact, I got thin in 9 months. I went from 250 plus pounds to 128 pounds in less than 9 months. But I was sick. I stepped on a scale twice a day. I ate the same thing every day for 9 months. I binge ate on Saturdays where I ate over probably 10,000 calories. I ruined my relationship with exercise. I was not happy. My mental health was not good, and the only thing that changed between the 250 pounds and the 128 pounds is how fucking people like you treated me. Healthy looks different for everybody. And I crawled my way back from that. And this body is how I got healthy.
In case no one has ever said this out loud to you, it was not okay that your mom put you in Weight Watchers in elementary school.
You know, it's like if I'm feeling depressed, I won't reach for that hamburger. I'll go for a run, or I'll drink a litre of water, you know, and am I a better person for doing that? Potentially. Do I judge people for being overweight? I do. Yeah, because to me, it just says that you're lazy, you know, and this is how you live your life. In fact, you know, there's a good Joe Rogan clip about this. No, just hang on, I'll find it. Well, they like to use that excuse, don't they? Some people are born bigger. What about caveman times? You know, we had to eat to survive back then. And this actually brings me on to why I think protein shakes are so good. This is just who I am. You know, I'm an honest guy. And yes, I will tell a girl I don't fancy her because she's bigger. But further down the line, I know that I'm doing her a favour. I mean, the amount of girls that'll just catfish you these days, you know. Filters, too much makeup, you know, just be yourself. You know, that's why my profile picture is a picture of me at the gym with my shirt off, you know, just taking a normal, natural selfie, exactly, because I want people to see the real me. And I'm not saying that I want to date someone too skinny, you know what I mean, because curvy, yeah, curvy's nice. But for me, it's not all about looks. You know, I want someone who's going to care about me, who's going to support me in my goals, who'll, you know, love me no matter what. A bit like a mother, yeah.
Something I don't think we talk about enough is the fact that anti-fat bias is often performative. I frequently encounter individuals who have close relationships with people in their lives who they love and respect who are fat, and they know that fatness doesn't make someone less competent, less capable, or less worthy, but who still engage in fat-phobic behavior with certain people in certain settings. And this is because being cruel or dismissive to fat people is not only socially acceptable, but it's encouraged. So much so that harassing fat people can even be a way for people, and especially men, to bond and gain social capital. We see this all the time in gaming chats, Reddit threads, trolling campaigns, and also in person with bullying and harassment. In these types of settings, fat-phobic behavior is expected, or else the person won't be accepted as a valid member of the group. So even if the person has a parent, sibling, friend, or even a romantic partner who's fat, they may still choose to say or do fat-phobic things in order to be accepted in their social group. But the performative nature of this behavior doesn't diminish the very real harm that it creates. And ultimately, all it ends up doing is making life worse for fat people, including for the people they claim to love.
Or I also think that the toxicity of diet culture cannot be overestimated. And so many people are oppressed by it and have built their life around trying to meet certain health standards or beauty standards that when they see someone who appears to have opted out of that system, it incites a lot of rage.
I would rather only live for 30 years happily in this fat body enjoying food during my only life than live one day as the type of person that talks to others like this.
I think that there's a lot of subtextual resentment. Some people feel like fat people who are happy have essentially opted out of a system that keeps most people pretty unhappy because maybe they don't like working out all the time or they don't like restricting what they eat all the time, but they want this certain look, they want to feel healthy, they want to meet a certain aesthetic standard. And if somebody doesn't choose to do that and they seem to be happy in their life, I think that it just makes a lot of people pretty mad to see fat people being happy for that reason.
I believe in fupa supremacy because look at how I ate and left no crumbs. Look at how my fupa came to do what it needed to do. Fupa supremacy. If you ever have any thoughts of, oh, I can't wear this, my dear, fupa supremacy. I need you guys to just fupa supremacy because no crumbs. No crumbs. Zero crumbs.
All right, well, I got a few swimsuit combos I'm going to be trying on here today. Now, I know you can get this brand at Walmart. but I just realized they only go up to a 3X, and sometimes I need a 4 or 5. Now, there's no shame in that game, okay? If you got, if you wear a bigger size, that's all right. You're going shopping and you're embarrassed to buy the biggest size, it's okay. I'll do it for you. I don't care. We're gonna wear what we want, and we're gonna be fashionable doing it.
I finally got some of these here coveralls. These are from Key Workwear, and I got a men's extra large short because I'm the size of an extra large man who's short. And let me tell you, I mean, they're riding a little. We got kind of a snug fit here, but I can still get going. And there was a time in my life where purchasing anything in an extra large would have just friggin' sent me. But I've done the work over the last couple of years, growing to appreciate my meat bag. And now listen, it's doing its job. I'm fucking sturdy. It's hard to knock me over, I mean, I'm built for this.
So I definitely think the moral panic thing is something I can see clearer when I take the hermeneutic of their specific interests in making people feel a certain kind of way about health more generally and fatness in particular.
Gorgeous, gorgeous girls know that the concept of a free market is an illusion created by capitalism in order to maintain control of our population by making people think that things are their fault. And gorgeous, gorgeous girls know that their body image issues and insecurities are too.
The other thing that seems pretty clear when I take this alternative hermeneutical posture is that people make so much money off of promising people that they can help them lose weight when we know that it is almost impossible to lose and keep off more than a couple of pounds for a protracted amount of time. Well, who benefits from that? Diet product companies, diet culture, any kind of fat-free, low-fat, low-sugar, no sugar. My battery died, and then my SD card filled up, and the sun is setting, so probably that is the universe's way of telling my chatty ass to wrap it up. I think what I was in the middle of saying is basically, who benefits from people being truly bought in to both striving for a specific health or wellness standard, but also of performing that for other people? Big corporations, they make a lot of money off of this, as well as influencers. There's a reason, I think, why Gwyneth Paltrow / Goop came up as such a strong association, because she is one of the more sort of nakedly transparent influencers in this space who is selling a specific aesthetic and brand and lifestyle in the name of wellness to make money. But she's far from the only one. And when I personally even just think about the amount of money that I have poured in towards achieving a certain feeling of being healthy based on performing this idea of wellness, yeah, I could have gone to Europe a couple times for that. So I guess it's time for me to start to wrap this up. I do think when I examine sort of the different hypotheses or theories of the case that different hermeneutical keys would lead me down, I am going to say that it makes more sense to me that there may be macro forces who are highly invested in keeping us squabbling amongst ourselves as to whose diet works the best and is the best, of blaming each other for poor health outcomes that we may or may not actually be able to control, but that we have bought into the idea that we can control, and getting us to fork over bukus of cash in the hopes of achieving a certain lifestyle, a certain aesthetic, and a certain perceived health outcome. That makes a lot more sense to me than what I've observed, which is if you ask people in my life, I'm probably one of the most self-disciplined and goal-oriented people you can imagine. And the only things that has led me to is weight cycling, eating disorders, and exacerbating an underlying autoimmune disease that I didn't know I had. I mean, really, when I look at where I'm at right now, which is after 2 years, my autoimmune disease finally being mostly managed, taking medicines that have caused me to put on a good amount of weight, but overall actually feeling like a human again, versus where I was at the beginning of that, which is a autoimmune disease completely out of control, but with few less pounds. Which of those was actually healthier? I feel better now. And irony of ironies, the reason it took so long for them to even diagnose my autoimmune disease is because I was fat. And when I brought it up as a possibility, they said, oh no, people couldn't really get to your size with this particular disease. It doesn't typically allow it. Well, thanks, Judy. So helpful. And such a great example of why fat people don't like going to the doctor, because that's the kind of shit they hear. So yeah, shocking they have worse outcomes when they're less likely to go to the doctor father, and if they do go, they may not be able to fit into the machines that are needed, or they may not have the full range of possible things that can be wrong with them evaluated because of the healthcare provider's own personal perceptions about their bodies. Like, shock horror. What an awesome cycle of shittiness to establish that people can't get out of. The other thing that's underlying all of this, I think, is, at least here in America, a chronic fear of death and unwillingness to acknowledge the reality that death is coming for us all. And I think at the end of the day, I feel very similarly about pursuing health and wellness as the immortal philosopher Katya Zamolodchikova feels about plastic surgery.
If you do Botox and if you do plastic surgery with the full knowledge and awareness that you are fighting a losing battle, then you're good. But if you really think you're going to turn back Father Time, he's gone.
So yeah, basically, there's nothing wrong with trying to be healthier. But if you think that you're tricking Father Time or evading death by pursuing health above everything, you've kind of already lost the game. Oh, and I meant to say this, but I didn't, so before I put my camera away. This is something I've needed to hear, so if you've not heard this, I will say it to you. You don't owe anybody health. You don't owe it to yourself. You don't owe it to the world. You don't owe it to your mom. You don't owe it to your church. You don't owe health to anyone. Health is such a nebulous concept. All you can do is deal with the genetic and environmental cards you were dealt with the best way you can, whatever that looks like for you. Anyway, I hope I can edit that into something vaguely coherent. That was me trying to synthesize 100 pages worth of notes into something a little more digestible. Where I leave this entire year of reflection off with is, I'm really thankful to have a body that feels good on a day-to-day basis. I feel better about my own body when I'm not focused on judging the way other people's bodies look and worried about if I'm correctly performing my own healthiness to them. And really what I would like to do is dismantle my own ableism and my own fat phobia. So you will likely be seeing some videos about the origins of that, at least in my own context, here sometime in the future. But with all that being said, let me know what you thought about today's video. I'd be particularly interested to hear how everybody is doing in the new year, where there's this huge push to go to the gym, get on a new diet. Noom is stalking my ass and will not leave me alone, no matter which social media platform I go to. Let me know your experiences down below. Everybody be kind to one another. Disagreement good, abuse bad. And yeah, if you like the video, stick around for more, and I guess I will just catch you guys later. Bye!